video here about how we get around in snowshoes in the wintertime. I personally like these plastic ones with the rubber straps. They're kind of my favorite, but there's multiple kinds you can use. We'll show some later. But in order to get through the snow, you got to remember to keep your tips up so that you don't get in the trip. So we always got to lift, take the snow that accumulates off. And when you want to turn around, it's much like cross-country skiing. So you turn one boot first, then the other, instead of trying to do something like this where you get hung up. Lift up, shake the snow off, turn your boot, and go to the other one. When you start going up steeper hills, it also helps to do this duck walk sort of thing to help make it so you don't slide back down the hill. We have another style where you go up a hill where you traverse, where you go diagonally, sort of like switchbacks. Snow here with a crust on top and soft underneath, so with my weight, I'm over 200 pounds, I sink through pretty easy. That's one of the reasons I like the bigger snowshoes, because it supports my weight better. The smaller snowshoes I'd be pushing through deeper. But it's actually a pretty easy sport. The beginner, it's good to have the poles to help you stand up. It's really not that hard to get around. Lift your knees high, hips above the snow when you're moving forwards. Turn around one leg at a time. It's easy, and then once you pack a trail down, the guys behind you have it easier too. Right, we got another version of the snowshoes. This is the more traditional kind, 3.5 feet long. They really displace my weight well, but I find with the leather bindings that we have on these, that when they get wet and they stretch, you're constantly tightening them back up. But that's why I prefer the plastic ones with the rubber binding, or even better yet, a ratchet type binding. But these bigger snowshoes are hard to find with the ratchet binding. With these ones, it's really important that you lift your tips. They've got a hole here for your toe to curl through into, so that you don't trip up in them as easy. Just tighten this thing up. This is the downside of the leather straps. Forever tightening them back up. You really got to lift your knees at this time. Do the duck walk to get up the hill. With these ones I sink in a lot less. There's more area to hold me up. Being 220 pounds, I need a larger snowshoe than a lot of people just to be able to stay up on the snow when you're in this deep snow like this. I keep these style just as show, really. I don't use them too much just because it's so hard to keep the bindings tight on these older ones. You see what happens when your tips start getting under the snow. It's really hard to move forwards, so you got to really lift. But I don't really enjoy this type of snowshoe that much. So you really get to see the disadvantage of what the old pioneers and natives had to go through. You really couldn't hike that well in this leather type. They come off so easily. So the modern ratchet binding or the rubber one on that plastic set I was using, they hold on so much better that you don't just kick them off like that with the newer style. But they work, they'll get you through the snow. It's a heck of a lot better with drier boots staying above the snow than down below it. And we'll take you for a look at what the three different types of snowshoes that are really available these days are. So these are the three styles of snowshoes that I use. We have sets like these for my kids because they're way easier to walk in, being smaller, and they don't weigh much. You get a double binding would be even better, where you can strap it down and crank it down. But put your toe in first to get that tight, and tighten this up, and then tighten the back, either binding or this turnbuckle system. And you need to tighten the boot up to fit once you got your toe in there and tight. The new style ones have a nice little crampon setup too, so when you get onto ice, it's a lot more controllable. So with these ones, and especially these ones, my personal favorite kind, you get onto ice, you can slide backwards, forwards, wherever, and you can see what my weight does to them. They're starting to crack them. So I just weigh more than these things are probably rated for. But you get your toe in there nice and tight and just strap these over the back of your boot. You put them on where the strap goes right across this hard spot so it doesn't dig into your foot. You get it right across in here and it stays on pretty good. And when you get into a bind with these things, if you see you have your binding snap, a little fishing line, and you repair them, and I've actually, rather than buying new bindings, I've been using like that for 2 years and it hasn't had too much of an issue. Just keep walking in them. Be careful. These ones, if they were to break like that, you may be able to do the same sort of thing with a piece of old shoelace and just tie the two lines together, or two holes together, and in a pinch you could still walk with them. This kind here, you put up a hole in it, and you're gonna need some special tools. You're gonna really sharp needle or a hole punch. Maybe take a knife and pop a hole and be able to string them back together to get you out of the bush. But they just stretch so much when they get wet. I would way rather have a binding style or the rubber strap-on style than the traditional leather kind, because they could be real trouble. And then another thing I found with these kind, I have probably at least a half dozen of this type of snowshoe, some wider, some long like these. The GV in Quebec, they make really good snowshoes. These are GV as well. Most of my snowshoes are. But with the sinew type, we get the pack rats, bush rats, squirrels. They'll come along and they'll chew them up. If you have them hanging on the wall in the shed, they'll climb up there and they'll chew them up on you. So you get a really expensive pair of snowshoes, and they just they ruin them on you. So we don't have that problem with these when they're not made out of natural products. Like the traditional style, the animals aren't attracted to them, they don't chew them up, so they last longer that way. And even for being small, they do have pretty good flotation. These are obviously too small for me, they're my child's, but you get the idea. These are the type that are most commercially available, and I personally stay away from these. They're great to use, but I much prefer the plastic ones, and if you can, you get the really expensive ones, one with a binding. Anyways, that should sum it up, and we'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. Alright, I went out and put another pair of snowshoes on. This is a more traditional style, something that made out of sinew and wood and leather instead of plastic and rubber. They, when you get these type of bindings wet, there's leather will stretch, and they're forever coming off. You just have to keep tightening them up. maybe pop a couple holes in there for the binding to fit into. They're much more of a challenge to walk in than the rubber type that I like. The rubber bindings with the plastic actual shoe. But these ones, you still get around with them good. You just got to remember to keep these tips up. That'll trip you up if you don't lift your knees high. So you get around in them pretty good. Really keep those tips up. Clear the snow off. Turn around with these ones, you really got to lift your leg up. Pack the snow down to stability. And bring the other leg around. Definitely have a crusty layer of snow on top. Pop through because it's so soft underneath. The turning is just like cross-country skis. You lift the one leg up, swing it, and then bring the other leg around. Oh.